A Pennsylvania man hired a au pair to watch his daughter, then spent the next year planning a double murder with her while his wife slept upstairs. This isn't fiction. This is what prosecutors say happened in a Virginia home in February 2023. The case involves an affair, a BDSM website, an elaborate catfishing scheme, and a stranger lured into a bedroom under false pretenses. It involves a man willing to execute his marriage, his dignity, and his freedom, all for someone his own wife had welcomed into their home. This is the au pair affair, and the details reveal how domestic deception can turn into something far darker. The story started in August 2022 when Brendan Banfield brought home a 22-year-old Brazilian au pair named Juliana Magalhães to care for his 4-year-old daughter. He was 40. His wife, Christine, was a pediatric intensive care nurse, working the kind of hours that exhausted her. The marriage had survived numerous affairs on both sides. Brendan had cheated before, Christine had cheated before. They both knew it, but this affair was different. This one didn't stay contained. You need to watch because this case reveals something darker than typical infidelity. It reveals premeditation. It reveals how easily ordinary people can convince themselves that murder solves personal problems. It reveals how a person can walk into a bedroom, stab their spouse multiple times, and then call 911 claiming self-defense. Brendan Banfield was an IRS agent. He made decent money. He had a stable job. He had a family. By almost any reasonable metric, he had achieved what society says should make him content. Yet, he wanted more. He wanted Juliana, and he wanted to keep his daughter and avoid the financial consequences of divorce. Prosecutors argued that by October 2022, Banfield expressed a clear desire to Juliana: get rid of his wife. Not divorce, not separation, get rid of. The phrasing matters because it moved the situation from personal crisis to criminal conspiracy. Juliana testified that at first she thought he was joking, then she realized he wasn't. The plan they allegedly developed was baroque in its complexity. They would use the BDSM website FetLife to create a fake account under Christine's name. This account would be designed to lure a stranger to the house for what that stranger believed was a consensual but violent sexual encounter. When the stranger arrived, something would go horribly wrong. Someone would get hurt. In the chaos, Brendan would kill his wife. The stranger would be blamed. The whole thing would look like a home invasion gone wrong. Finding the stranger took time, but they found Joseph Ryan, a 39-year-old man from Washington, D.C. Ryan had no prior connection to the Banfields. He had never met any of them. He was, in every meaningful sense, a stranger selected for a role he didn't know he was playing. Ryan agreed to meet someone he believed was Christine Banfield for a BDSM encounter involving a knife. He had no idea that when he showed up to that house in Herndon, Virginia, on February 24, 2023, he was walking into his own murder. What happened next has two very different accounts. Brendan Banfield's account says he came home, heard commotion, went upstairs, found Ryan with his wife, yelled police, tried to subdue Ryan, and fired shots in self-defense. He said Ryan had brought the knife himself. He said he was the protector, not the aggressor. The prosecution's account says something completely different. Brendan arrived home as planned. He went into the bedroom where his wife was. He stabbed her in the neck repeatedly. Then Joseph Ryan, trying to intervene or defend himself, became an obstacle. Brendan shot him. Juliana then fired a second shot. The whole scene was then staged to look like Brendan had stumbled upon an attack and reacted heroically. The evidence supported the prosecution's version. Christine had been stabbed multiple times in the neck. The knife bore her DNA and Ryan's DNA, but not Brendan's. If Brendan had wielded the knife as his defense claimed, his DNA should have been on it. The absence of his DNA suggested someone else held it. Prosecutors argued it was Ryan, placed there by Brendan as part of the staging. When police arrived that morning, they found Brendan kneeling over his wife's body, his hands on her neck. He told them she was still conscious and had directed him to apply pressure to slow bleeding. Her family members, however, testified that Christine's injuries were too severe for her to have given coherent instructions. In fact, they suggested she was already dead or dying. Juliana's testimony provided the crucial detail that changed everything. She described the whole plot from beginning to end. She described creating the fake account. She described luring Ryan. She described what happened when Ryan arrived and what Brendan did to his wife. She described shooting Ryan herself. She didn't minimize her own role. She didn't make excuses. She said she had gotten lost in her relationship with Brendan and made catastrophic choices. The jury deliberated for 9 hours over 2 days. The verdict was unanimous on 2 counts of aggravated murder. Brendan Banfield was guilty. What makes this case particularly dark is the callousness afterward. After Christine was dead and Joseph Ryan was dead, Brendan and Juliana continued their relationship. Investigators found a framed photo of the two of them on Brendan's bedside table. That photo was taken after the murders. They were building a life together while Christine's body had barely cooled, while Joseph Ryan's mother was learning her son was gone, while a 4-year-old girl lost her mother and had her father arrested all in the same month. The sentencing came in stages. Juliana, who pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and agreed to testify, was expected to receive time served. Prosecutors asked for leniency because her cooperation was essential to convicting Brendan. The judge disagreed. Judge Penny Escoret called it the most serious manslaughter scenario she had ever seen. She sentenced Juliana to 10 years. Not time served, not 5 years. 10 years, she said Juliana's actions were deliberate, self-serving, and demonstrated profound disregard for human life. Juliana wept when hearing the sentence. She expressed remorse for the pain she caused. But remorse, coming after years of silence and only because she was caught, doesn't undo the murders. Remorse doesn't bring Joseph Ryan back to his mother. Remorse doesn't give Christine Banfield's daughter her mother back. When sentencing came for Brendan, scheduled for May 2026, he faced life without parole. The conviction on 2 counts of aggravated murder virtually guaranteed he would spend the rest of his life in prison. The conviction on child endangerment added to the picture of a man who was willing to risk his daughter's safety, who was willing to have her in the basement during her mother's murder, who cared more about avoiding divorce costs than about keeping his child's mother alive. Joseph Ryan's mother gave a victim impact statement that cut to the heart of the tragedy. She said Joe was her confidant, her biggest ally, her cheerleader. She said he didn't deserve to be treated as disposable. He didn't deserve to be used as a pawn in someone else's scheme. He was a real person with real relationships, and he was erased for reasons that had nothing to do with him. His only connection to the Banfield family was that he agreed to an encounter he thought was consensual, but was actually a setup for his murder. The trial revealed something about how ordinary people operate when motivated by self-interest and fear. Brendan Banfield wasn't a criminal psychopath. He was a tax agent who got caught in an affair and panicked about the consequences. Rather than face divorce, rather than accept that his affair had exploded his marriage, rather than deal with the financial or custody implications, he decided another person's death was acceptable. So did Juliana, who was young enough to think that betraying her employer's wife would somehow lead to happiness. Neither of them got what they wanted. Juliana got 10 years in prison and a permanent criminal record. Brendan got life without parole. The daughter lost her mother. Joseph Ryan's family lost a son and nephew. And Christine Banfield's family lost a woman who dedicated her career to saving children's lives in an ICU, only to be murdered by her own husband in her own bedroom. By May 2026, Brendan Banfield would be sentenced to the rest of his life in a cell. He would have decades to reflect on his choices. He would have decades to consider what he destroyed for the sake of avoiding a divorce. He would have decades in prison while his daughter grows up knowing her father killed her mother. That knowledge will follow her for the rest of her life. If you found this case disturbing, subscribe for more true crime stories that reveal the dangerous intersections of desire, betrayal, and violence. Drop a comment below. How do people convince themselves that murder is a solution to their personal problems? Thanks for watching.